"Ma'am, this is a courtroom," Judge Raymond Kessler said, leaning back in his chair with a cold smile. "Not a place for bedtime stories about missing money and miracle sons." A few people in the gallery laughed. At the plaintiff's table, Maria Bennett stood alone in a faded gray coat, both hands trembling around a folder of papers. She looked smaller than everyone else in that room. A single mother. A hospital cafeteria worker. A woman who had not slept more than 3 hours in 2 nights. And now, in front of strangers, a judge had just laughed at the only truth she had left. Maria swallowed hard and whispered, "Your Honor, I'm not lying." Judge Kessler tapped his pen against the bench. "Then where is your proof?" Maria looked toward the courtroom doors. Empty. Her heart sank. Because her son, the one person who could change everything, had not arrived. And across the aisle, the man trying to take her home smiled like he had already won. His name was Victor Harlan, a polished real estate developer in a navy suit, gold watch, and shoes so clean they looked untouched by the world. He owned apartment buildings, parking lots, and half the storefronts along Main Street in Briarwood, Ohio. He also owned the house Maria had lived in for 16 years. At least, that was what he claimed. The house was small. White siding. Blue shutters. A crooked mailbox her son had painted when he was 12. It was the only place Maria had ever felt safe after her husband died. Her husband, Daniel Bennett, had been a firefighter. He was killed in a warehouse fire when their son, Caleb, was only 10 years old. After the funeral, people brought casseroles. They hugged Maria. They told her, "Call us if you need anything." But as years passed, the calls stopped. The bills did not. Maria worked double shifts at St. Agnes Hospital, serving eggs and coffee to nurses, doctors, tired families, and patients who had nowhere else to go. She never complained. She packed leftovers for elderly neighbors. She kept a spare blanket in her car in case she saw someone sleeping outside the church. People in town knew her as kind. But kindness did not protect her from men like Victor Harlan. 3 months before the court hearing, Maria came home from work and found a notice taped to her front door. Eviction notice. She read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change. According to the paper, she had failed to pay back taxes and fees attached to a loan she never remembered signing. The house had been purchased by Harlan Development Group. She had 30 days to leave. Maria called the county office. She waited on hold for 47 minutes. Then a woman with a tired voice told her the records showed a lien, a transfer, and a signature. Maria's signature. "But I never signed anything," Maria said. The woman sighed. "Ma'am, you'll have to take that up in court." That night, Maria sat at her kitchen table under the weak yellow light and stared at the copy of the signature. It looked like hers. Almost. But the curve on the M was wrong. Daniel would have noticed it immediately. Caleb would have too. Her son had always been sharp with details. Even as a boy, he could spot a missing screw in his bicycle from across the garage. He could hear when the refrigerator motor sounded different. He could look at a math problem and see the answer before Maria had even found a pencil. But Caleb was not in Briarwood anymore. He was in Washington, D.C., working a job he rarely discussed. Maria knew he worked with records, investigations, and government offices. He had told her enough to know he was doing something important, but not enough for her to worry. And Maria was a mother. So she worried anyway. When she told Caleb about the eviction, his voice changed. "Mom," he said slowly, "scan me everything. Every letter. Every page. Every notice. Baby, I don't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," he said. "That house is Dad's house too." For 2 weeks, Caleb called every night. He asked questions. He requested copies. He told Maria not to sign anything. Then, 3 days before the hearing, he said, "Mom, listen carefully. I found something." Maria gripped the phone. "What?" There was a pause. I can't explain everything yet. But I need you to be strong in court. Don't let them scare you. Don't let Judge Kessler rush you." Maria frowned. "You know the judge?" Caleb's voice lowered. "I know enough." Before she could ask more, a voice in the background called his name. "Caleb?" "I have to go, Mom. I'm coming home for the hearing." The call ended. But on the morning of court, Caleb's flight was delayed. Then delayed again. Then Maria's phone died while she was sitting on a wooden bench outside courtroom B. So she walked in alone. Victor Harlan came with 2 attorneys. Maria came with a folder, a prayer, and a heart beating too fast. The courtroom smelled like old wood, coffee, and winter coats. A faded American flag stood in the corner. A court officer called the case. Harlan Development Group versus Maria Bennett. Maria rose. Victor's attorney, a thin man named Paul Greer, spoke first. He was smooth. Calm. Almost bored. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. Ms. Bennett defaulted on obligations tied to the property. My client legally purchased the lien and followed all required steps. She has refused to vacate." Maria stood. "That's not true," she said. "I never took that loan. I never signed those papers." Judge Kessler looked down at her over his glasses. "Ms. Bennett, do you have an attorney?" "No, Your Honor. I couldn't afford one." Victor's attorney gave a soft smile. Judge Kessler glanced at the documents. "The court has records bearing your signature." Maria opened her folder. "I have copies too. The signature is wrong. And the notary stamp is from a woman who died before the date on the document." The courtroom went quiet for a second. Victor's smile flickered. Judge Kessler narrowed his eyes. "That's a serious accusation." "I know," Maria said. "My son found it. He works with public records and—" The judge cut her off. "Your son?" "Yes, Your Honor. He found other papers too. He said there were more cases like mine." Victor's attorney stood quickly. "Objection. Speculation. We are here for this property, not rumors from a son who isn't present." Judge Kessler looked at Maria. "Where is this son?" Maria turned toward the door again. Still empty. "He's coming." The judge leaned back. And then he laughed. Not loudly at first. Just enough. Enough for the attorneys to hear. Enough for the gallery to shift in their seats. Enough to make Maria's cheeks burn. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "I have heard many last-minute stories in this courtroom. Sick relatives. Missing papers. Secret witnesses. Sons with magical evidence. But court is not a place for emotional performances." Maria's eyes filled. "My son is not magical evidence." Then perhaps he should have arrived on time. Victor lowered his head, hiding a grin. Judge Kessler continued, "You are asking this court to ignore official records because you don't like what they say." "No," Maria said, her voice shaking. "I'm asking you to look at who made them." The judge's face hardened. "Careful, Ms. Bennett." That was when Victor Harlan stood. He adjusted his jacket and spoke like a man giving a speech at a charity dinner. "Your Honor, I have sympathy for Ms. Bennett. Truly, I do. But sympathy cannot erase responsibility. I have offered her additional time. I even offered assistance with moving expenses. But there comes a point where people must accept reality." Maria turned to him. "You sent men to my house at night." Victor blinked. "Excuse me?" "You sent 2 men in a black truck. They parked outside at midnight and took pictures through my windows." Victor's attorney shook his head. "Baseless. They scared my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez. She called the police." Judge Kessler looked annoyed now. Do you have a police report? Maria searched her folder, hands shaking. I had it. I think it's here. Papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. A few people laughed again. Maria crouched down quickly, gathering the papers as her face crumpled. In that moment, she was not just fighting for a house. She was fighting not to disappear. The court officer moved to help, but Judge Kessler raised a hand. Ms. Bennett, if you cannot organize your own evidence, how do you expect this court to take your claims seriously? Maria froze. Something inside her broke quietly. She looked up at the judge and said, because poor people can tell the truth too. The courtroom went silent. Even Victor stopped smiling. Judge Kessler's expression tightened. Enough. I am prepared to rule. Maria stood slowly. Please, Your Honor. 5 more minutes. No. My son will be here. I said no. Judge Kessler picked up the order. Based on the records provided, the court finds in favor of Harlan Development Group. Ms. Bennett will vacate the property within 10 days. Maria stared at him. 10 days. 16 years of life reduced to 10 days. Her husband's work boots still sat in the garage. Caleb's childhood hike marks were still penciled on the kitchen doorway. The rosebush Daniel planted before his last shift was still alive beside the porch. Maria opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Victor's attorney began packing his briefcase. Victor leaned toward Maria and said softly, where only she could hear, "You should have taken the moving money." Maria looked at him. "You forged my name." Victor smiled. "Careful, Maria. Accusations can get expensive." Then the courtroom doors opened. Not gently. They swung wide with a heavy sound that made everyone turn. A young man stepped inside wearing a dark suit, rein on his shoulders, and a leather briefcase in one hand. He was tall, clean-cut, with Daniel Bennett's eyes. Maria's breath caught. Caleb. He walked down the aisle without looking left or right. The court officer stepped forward. "Sir, court is in session." Caleb reached into his jacket and showed his identification. The officer looked at it. Then his face changed. He stepped aside. Judge Kessler frowned. "Who are you?" Caleb stopped beside his mother. "My name is Caleb Bennett." Victor's attorney looked irritated. "Your Honor, the matter has already been ruled on." Caleb placed his briefcase on the table. "With respect, it has not been entered yet." Judge Kessler's eyes narrowed. "And why should that matter?" Caleb looked straight at him. "Because this ruling is based on fraudulent documents connected to an active federal investigation." The room changed. It was as if the air had been pulled out. Victor's hand tightened around the back of his chair. Judge Kessler sat up. "What did you just say?" Caleb opened the briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. "I am a forensic records analyst assigned to a federal financial crimes task force. For the past 11 months, we have been investigating a pattern of forged liens and property transfers targeting widows, seniors, and low-income homeowners across 3 counties. Maria covered her mouth. She knew Caleb worked with records. She did not know this. Caleb continued. "My mother did not know the full details because I was not allowed to discuss an active case. But when she sent me her paperwork, I recognized the same notary stamp, the same filing sequence, and the same altered signature pattern we had seen before." Victor's attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. This man is emotionally connected to the defendant." Caleb turned to him. "That is true. I am her son. Which is why I immediately handed the file to my supervisor and recused myself from direct evidence handling." He placed another document on the table. "This affidavit is from Special Agent Denise Marlowe of the Financial Crimes Division. It confirms that the Bennett property documents match evidence in an ongoing investigation." Judge Kessler's face lost color. Victor whispered to his attorney, "Shut this down." But Caleb heard him. And so did half the courtroom. Caleb looked at Victor for the first time. "Mr. Harlan, did you know Evelyn Price?" Victor blinked. "I know many people. She was 82. Lost her home last year after a lien was filed with the same dead notary stamp used on my mother's document." Victor said nothing. Caleb took out another paper. "Did you know Marcus Hill? Vietnam veteran. Duplex on Foster Avenue. Same pattern." Victor's attorney snapped, "Your Honor, this is not a trial." Caleb nodded. "No. But it may become one." The judge stared at the papers. His hands were no longer steady. Maria looked from Caleb to the judge. Something was wrong. Caleb's voice softened, but his words became sharper. "There is one more reason I came today." Judge Kessler looked up. Caleb held up a copy of a court order. "Your Honor, you presided over 4 previous eviction hearings involving Harlan Development Group. In each case, the homeowner appeared without counsel. In each case, allegations of forged paperwork were dismissed without review. In each case, the ruling came within minutes." The gallery began whispering. Judge Kessler slammed his gavel. "Order." Caleb did not flinch. "I'm not accusing the court of a crime. But I am formally requesting this ruling be stayed pending review by the State Judicial Conduct Board and the Federal Task Force." Victor's face turned red. "This is intimidation." Maria, still trembling, looked at Caleb. "Baby, what is happening?" Caleb turned to her, and for the first time since entering the room, his expression cracked. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner, Mom." Maria touched his arm. "You came." His eyes shone. "I told you I would." Judge Kessler looked at the court officer. "Clear the gallery." But before anyone could move, the side door opened. A woman in a charcoal coat entered with 2 federal agents behind her. She walked straight to the front. "Your Honor," she said, "I'm Special Agent Denise Marlowe. We have a warrant to obtain certified copies of all filings connected to Harlan Development Group, including this case." Victor stepped back. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Agent Marlowe turned to Victor. "Mr. Harlan, you are not under arrest at this moment. But you are advised not to leave the building. At this moment." Those 3 words landed like thunder. Maria gripped the table. For months, Victor had made her feel powerless. Now he looked like a man trapped in a room with every lie he had ever told. Judge Kessler removed his glasses. "This is highly irregular." Agent Marlowe's eyes moved to him. "So are forged documents accepted as legal evidence without basic verification?" The courtroom was silent. Caleb gently picked up Maria's scattered papers from the table and placed them back in her folder, one by one. It was such a small thing. But Maria began to cry. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just the quiet tears of a woman who had been holding herself together for too long. Judge Kessler cleared his throat. "The previous ruling is withdrawn. The eviction order is stayed pending investigation." Victor snapped, "You can't do that." The judge looked at him. "I just did." For the first time, Maria saw fear in Victor Harlan's eyes. Not sadness. Not guilt. Fear. And somehow, that made her feel even stronger. The hearing ended in chaos. Agents collected documents. The clerk whispered into the phone. Victor's attorney argued in a low, angry voice. Judge Kessler left through the side door without looking at Maria. But Maria stood still. Because her son was beside her. Outside the courthouse, rain fell softly on the steps. Reporters had already gathered near the entrance. Word traveled fast in small towns, especially when powerful people started falling. Caleb guided Maria away from the cameras. They stopped under the courthouse awning. Maria looked at him. "Are you really allowed to be here?" Caleb smiled tiredly. "As your son, yes. As an investigator, only carefully." She laughed through her tears. Then she hugged him. Not the polite hug of adults. The desperate hug of a mother who had once carried a little boy through grief, and now that boy had returned carrying the truth. "I thought I lost the house," she whispered. Caleb closed his eyes. "You almost did." A week later, the story became bigger than Briarwood. Local news reported that multiple homeowners had come forward. A retired school bus driver. A widowed pastor's wife. A disabled veteran. A single father who had been living in a motel with his 2 daughters after losing his house to one of Harlan's companies. The investigation uncovered forged signatures, fake notices, dead notaries, and rushed court filings. Victor Harlan's public image collapsed overnight. His company's office windows, once polished and proud, were covered with news cameras and subpoena notices. But the most unexpected part came 2 months later. Judge Raymond Kessler requested a private meeting with Maria. Caleb told her she did not have to go. Maria thought about it for a long time. Then she said, "I want to hear what he has to say." They met in a small conference room inside the courthouse. Judge Kessler was not wearing his robe. Without it, he looked older. Smaller. He stood when Maria entered. "Mrs. Bennett," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." Maria sat across from him. Caleb stood behind her, silent. The judge folded his hands. "I reviewed the cases. All of them. And I owe you an apology." Maria said nothing. He looked down. "I thought I was being efficient. I thought I could tell the difference between real evidence and desperate excuses. I became too comfortable with people in suits and too impatient with people who came in scared." His voice cracked slightly. "When you said poor people can tell the truth too. I heard it. I just didn't want to face it." Maria studied him. The anger was still there. But so was something heavier. The memory of being laughed at when she was begging to be heard. "You didn't just embarrass me," she said. "You almost helped take my husband's house. My son's home. My life." The judge nodded. "I know." "No," Maria said softly. "You don't. But I hope now you'll remember." He looked at her with wet eyes. "I will." Maria stood. She did not forgive him with a hug. She did not tell him it was okay. Because it was not okay. But she gave him something better than comfort. She gave him the truth. And sometimes, truth is the beginning of change. 6 months later, Maria stood on her front porch as the sun rose over Briarwood. The blue shutters had been repainted. The crooked mailbox was fixed. The rosebush beside the porch had bloomed brighter than it had in years. Caleb was in the yard, kneeling beside a small wooden sign. Maria walked down the steps. "What are you doing?" He stepped back. The sign read, "Daniel Bennett Homeowner Justice Fund." Maria stared at it. Caleb smiled. "We're helping people fight bad paperwork before it steals their homes." Maria touched the sign with trembling fingers. "You named it after your father. He would have wanted this." Maria looked at the house, then at her son. For years, she had thought strength meant surviving quietly. Taking the extra shift. Paying the bill late but paying it. Smiling when people looked down on her. But that day in court taught her something different. Strength was also standing up with shaking hands. Telling the truth when powerful people laughed. Believing your voice mattered even when the room tried to silence it. And sometimes, justice did not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it arrived late. Breathless. Rain on its shoulders. Walking through a courtroom door as your son. Maria wrapped her arm around Caleb. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez waved from her porch. A church bell rang in the distance. And for the first time in months, Maria did not feel afraid of the future. She looked at the little house, the blooming roses, and the sign bearing Daniel's name. Then she whispered, "We're still here." And that was the victory. Not just keeping the house. Not just exposing Victor Harlan. Not just watching a judge learn humility too late. The real victory was that a woman who had been laughed at in public did not let humiliation become silence. Because people are not measured by their clothes, their bank accounts, or how confidently they walk into a courtroom. They are measured by the truth they carry. And one day, the people who laugh at that truth may find themselves standing before it.